Welcome to this introduction to the Dark Sun campaign setting. Today I'm going to give you a sense of the world of Athas, the Dark Sun campaign world, and the types of races you can play there. After having watched this, you should be able to sit down with your DM, ready to roll up your first characters. Because your DM will take you through the details, today we're just going to quickly introduce you to Athas. Then we will move on to helping you decide what type of character you would like to try first. Please remember that your DM is the final arbiter of what is included in their game. They may exclude options that I cover here, or allow additional options that go beyond what I have presented in this video. Okay, let's start by briefly going over what the Dark Sun campaign setting is and isn't. To give you a general feel for the world, I'll read a quote from the second page of the Wanderer's Journal by Troy Denning and Thomas B. Brown. I live in a world of fire and sand. The crimson sun scorches the life from anything that crawls or flies, and storms of sand scour the foliage from the barren ground. Lightning strikes from a cloudless sky, and peals of thunder roll unexplained across the vast tablelands. Even the wind, dry and searing as a kiln, can kill a man with thirst. This is a land of blood and dust, where tribes of feral elves sweep out of the salt plains to plunder lonely caravans. Mysterious singing winds call men to slow suffocation in the sea of silt, and legions of slaves clash over a few barrels of moldering grain. The dragon despoils entire cities while selfish kings squander their armies, raising gaudy palaces and garish tombs. This is my home, Athas. It is an arid and bleak place, a wasteland with a handful of austere cities clinging precariously to a few scattered oases. It is a brutal and savage land, beset by political strife and monstrous abominations, where life is grim and short. Hopefully that kickstarts your imagination. To put a little finer point on the subject, I'll add the following. The rays of Athas's scarlet sun burn through the olive sky, punishing mutant, monster, slave, and king alike. It is a setting where the heroes who were supposed to save the world failed millennia ago, while the evil and corrupt have had their way for scores of centuries. Characters are more likely to meet in a reeking slave pit at the beginning of the campaign than in a tavern. Either because of ancient genocidal wars or the brutal environment, many of the common monsters and races are either extinct or have mutated. There are no orcs, goblins, trolls, pixies, gnomes, ogres, Weemacs, or many other such creatures that are standard fare in other settings. Many of the other common races of a normal D&D setting that have persevered have mutated to survive on Athas. Mammalian draft and riding animals like horses and oxen may have never existed. Instead, these jobs are performed by giant insects and reptiles. Athas is a world where survival is the first consideration of adventurers. Maybe if your character does that long enough, they and their friends might be able to help make the world a better place. Before we dive into picking out your character, let me spend a few seconds telling you about my design studio, Dark House Rules Games. We make all manner of gaming content, but concentrate primarily on old-school D&D fare. One of the many products we offer that you as a player are going to need is character art. For a reasonable price, I can draw your character portrait, or if you're wanting to give your DM a special thank you gift, an NPC or party portrait. For just a little bit more, I can turn those into game tokens for your table or online. If you like what you see, please consider becoming a member of my Subscribestar page and/or subscribe to the Dark House Rules Games newsletter. It's free, and each month you get a sample of what we're working on. Well, enough about that. Let's get back to your introduction to Dark Sun. Hopefully you now have a good feel for what kind of world Athas is. Now let's move on to determining what kind of character you would like to play. The first thing you need to ask yourself is, how complex a character can I handle without getting bogged down in the mechanics of the system so much that it affects how much fun I'm having? All classes and races are modified from what appeared in the AD&D 2nd Edition Player's Handbook. If you are an experienced 2E player, you may not have much of a learning curve. But if you have little or no 2E AD&D experience yet, you may want to consider a simple or intermediate character. Having said that, if you think you can manage a dual-class human defiler psionicist with plans of becoming a dragon and still have a great time, by all means do so. Before I go any further, I must mention that aside from humans, all races have class restrictions and level limitations. Also, all races aside from humans and all classes have ability score prerequisites that must be met to play them. Alright, I think this will work better if we consider what classes sound fun and how much you as a player need to understand Dark Sun and AD&D 2E to play them smoothly. So I'm going to break the classes down into 3 categories. Number 1, simple classes. Number 2, intermediate classes. And number 3, advanced classes. Let's start with the simplest class of them all, the fighter. Fighters are good at weapons combat. They can be proficient in many weapons and have one that they can specialize in. They can also be of any alignment. In Dark Sun, fighters are trained to be soldiers, starting out as the rank and file and advancing to being generals who command whole armies. To reflect this, their special class abilities help them to train and lead armies. Things like being able to instruct units of soldiers in the use of weapons that they specialize in, operating and eventually constructing heavy war machines, supervising the construction of defenses, and commanding effectively large numbers of troops. Fighters also build armies of followers as they level up. At low level, a fighter is mechanically simple. You use the weapons you're good at to overcome your enemies. Fighters can also be dual and multi-classed depending on the race of the fighter. Taking a slight step up in complexity is the gladiator. Like the fighter, the gladiator is a combat-focused class. They take the basic combat abilities of the fighter and turn them up to 11. The drawbacks of playing a gladiator are, number 1, out of all the classes, gladiators are one of the most likely to start out as slaves. Number 2, gladiators cannot dual or multi-class. There's no such thing as a gladiator thief or a gladiator druid. Number 3, gladiators have more stringent ability requirements than fighters. What gladiators are best at is individual combat. They are automatically proficient in all handheld weapons and can specialize in multiple ones. They are experts in unarmed fighting, and they learn to move in such a way that even blows that they can't dodge completely are likely to land on some part of their body that is armored. Finally, like fighters, gladiators draw followers to themselves. Unlike fighters, they don't make great generals, though. To round out the simple classes, let's talk about thieves. While thieves may be a little more complex to build than the first 2 classes, they have only one low ability requirement. They also allow for a different kind of play than the other simple classes. Instead of hack and slash, thieves are all about sneak and steal. Of all the classes, thieves advance the quickest. Thieves also make many versatile dual and multi-class combos, being easily paired with many other classes. If you want to play the party scout, a thief is a good choice. That brings us to our intermediate classes, the first of which is a Templar. The Templars are clerics modeled after the old Mesopotamian priests of the early Bronze Age. Not only are they the servants of their god kings, but they are the bureaucrats that run their city-states. Because of this, Templars' powers are both magical and administrative. They are granted spells by their sorcerer monarchs, and have arrest, judgment, and requisition powers within their city-states. Inside the walls of their home cities, Templars wield enormous powers over the populace. Because of this, power-hungry and aggressively ambitious people fill the Templars' ranks, and the life of a Templar is a dog-eat-dog existence. Templars can dual and multi-class as well. The next of the intermediate classes are the Elemental and Para-Elemental Clerics. Their motivations, alignments, and beliefs vary from individual to individual and depending on the element they venerate. Each will in some way embody their element. A fire cleric might be rash, getting caught up in their passions, while an earth cleric could be somber and patient, not wanting to rush into a situation until all the possibilities have been considered. There are 8 types of clerics on Athos, earth, air, fire, water, silt, sun, rain, and magma. Each has its own flavor. As for class-specific powers, clerics can cast priest spells granted to them by their elements. Like other priests, they can turn undead, a useful power in a world peppered with ruined dead cities. As clerics advance, they gain the ability to ignore their element. Earth clerics could use this power to walk through walls. Eventually, clerics become able to gate in material from the elemental plane they worship. Much like thieves, clerics have lots of dual and multi-class options. Alright, let's get back to the warrior group for our next intermediate class, that being the ranger. Unlike the fighter and the gladiator, the ranger is not a purely combat-oriented class. Rangers still have all the advantages of the warrior group, but they are less about hack and slash, and more about tracking and survival in the wilderness of Athos. One of the main reasons I place Rangers in the intermediate complexity category is the large number of ability requirements the class has. Rangers are a composite class. They're part warrior, part druid. One other limiting factor Rangers have is they must all be good aligned. Rangers' special abilities include dual-wielding weapons. They can pull off this trick with far less trouble than even the most skilled gladiator. They are skilled trackers and are also good at sneaking around and blending into the shadows. As protectors of nature, Rangers each choose a species enemy which they specialize in fighting. Rangers are skilled animal handlers, understanding the body language and verbalizations of tame and wild creatures alike. As Rangers advance in level, they eventually gain the ability to cast priest spells and draw a small cadre of followers to them. These followers tend to be a handful of creatures of the land that the ranger has trod during their wanderings. Next up among the intermediate classes is the druid. The reason the druid is so far down this list is not that it has hard-to-roll ability requirements. It actually has fewer than the ranger. It's that they have a guarded land that many of their powers are tied to. Druids are protectors of nature in general and one plot of land in particular. Low-level druids are encouraged to wander the world and learn of Athos, but eventually they have to spend at least half their time guarding and tending their own lands. Druids can cast spells associated with the elements that define their guardian lands. While on their guardian lands, a druid can conceal themselves from the sight of others, speak with local animals, and all animals as they advance. At mid-level, the same becomes true of plants. Eventually, druids can shape change into any creature indigenous to their guardian lands. Like Templars, druids are very powerful at home, but less so while traveling. Druids have several dual and multi-class combinations. That brings us to the last of the intermediate class, those being mages. Mages are a type of wizard that do not specialize in a particular school of magic. I'll cover specialist wizards in the advanced classes. In the Dark Sun setting, all wizards presented as playable in the 2-box sets are of one of two types, defilers or preservers. On Athos, there is no mystical energy field for wizards to power their spells with. Because of this, wizards use life force, usually from plants and the nutrients that are in the soil, to provide the energy their spells need. Defilers pull this energy from a small area for expediency's sake, not caring that the plants around them are crumbling and the soil is turning to sterile ash. Preservers, on the other hand, cast a wider net to power their spells. They only take a little life from each organism, never enough to kill. The common people of Athos make no distinction between the two types of magic. In the city-states, Templars are always on the lookout for wizards, because magic is illegal. This and the large number of spells to choose from is why I've placed Defilers and Preserver Mages as the most complex intermediate character classes to play. We have at last arrived at the advanced classes. All of these classes will be a little complicated to build and may take a fair amount of understanding of the rules, not to mention a good grasp of arithmetic to run. Let's start the advanced classes with the Bard. Bards are performers, be they singers, dancers, musicians, or comedians. Because of this, they are both very role-playing heavy characters and have a lot of game mechanics to support their role in the world. To To start with, bards have strict ability requirements and are limited to only 2 races. In addition to this, at least one of the halves of the bard's alignment must be neutral. Being performers by nature, bards learn to use musical instruments more easily than any other class. All bards receive singing and chanting, as well as a musical instrument of their choice, as a bonus non-weapon proficiency when they are created. After that, they can learn to play 2 instruments for each non-weapon proficiency slot spent to do so. Bards have a limited range of thieving skills they can use to make their livings. The list is truncated when compared to thieves, but thievery is just something they dabble in. It's not their main focus. Bards can affect the emotions of those who witness their performances. They can inspire or calm listeners in mechanically significant ways. Lastly, Athasian bards are skilled at brewing poisons. This is very useful in the life of intrigue that many bards live. Next up in the list of advanced classes is another rogue, the traitor. Much like the bard, the traitor is a role-playing heavy class with several ability requirements and a limited number of races available to play. Traders are merchants who eventually either rise to the ranks to head or build their own trading house. This class requires both city-based and cross-country play, as goods are acquired in one market and sold for a profit in a city-state hundreds of miles away. Unlike bards, traders can be of any alignment, although the cutthroat nature of Athos may make playing a good allied trader more challenging. Traders can use the full range of thief abilities, but advance these skills more slowly than true thieves. Traders can brew poisons just like bards do. While bards are masters of musical instruments, traders are masters of the many tongues of the tablelands. Beyond any languages they might gain for other reasons, traders get a bonus language proficiency every 3 levels. Lastly, traders are good at fast talking, using persuasive words and rhetoric to overcome any objections their listeners might have to what they are presenting. This might help them convince a buyer to pay a premium price for shabby merchandise, or assure a Templar that the documents that were forged by the trader themselves are actually genuine. Traders can be played dual and multi-class as well. This brings us to the second most complex character class type to play. These are the Specialist Wizards. They have all the same problems as mages in that they still have to draw their power from living things around them. In addition to this, Specialist Wizards have further complicating factors. These include stricter ability requirements, spell restrictions, etc. With these restrictions come boons as well, though. While a Specialist Wizard may not be able to cast spells from an opposing school of magic, they receive bonus spells for their home school. They have similar trade-offs with saves versus spells from their school and their opposing schools. Each type of Specialist Wizard has their own quirks. Ask your DM for details if you want to play something like an Invoker, Illusionist, or Necromancer. Wild mages are very optional, so I will not cover them in this video. Now we have come to the most complex of the Dark Sun classes, the Psionicist. This class uses a third kind of supernatural power, separate from priest and wizard magic, to make their way in the world of Athos. Psionicists are their own power source. They have access to hundreds of unique powers that work differently in a mechanical sense than magic. Psionicists have strict ability requirements, but no racial or level limits in the Dark Sun setting. Psionicists have a number of dual and multi-class options, and are particularly great when dual-classed with magic-using classes. Ask your DM for more details. As for what makes Psionicists complex to run, their powers are gained in a regimented way that must be followed. Some powers have prerequisites. To use powers, Psionicist players must roll to initiate them, then track how much power is being used to maintain them. Psionicists gain large number of psionic powers when compared to wizards and priests, and some novice players find choosing from among them overwhelming in the heat of combat. Having said that, when played well, Psionicist player characters can be enormous fun. Now we have come to the third part of this video, the races of Athos. While the races of Athos are all different from the standard Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition races, none are particularly complicated to play. They each have advantages and disadvantages that lend them towards one sort of play or another. Only 3 races have much in the way of complicating factors, and those are more about how you would role-play them than anything mechanical. One thing that is different about every single Dark Sun player character race from their standard AD&D counterpart, if they have one, is all Dark Sun PCs have wild talent psionics without having to roll to awaken their abilities. The explanation for this is more than I want to get into in this video, so let's move on to human player characters. The humans of Athos are much like their counterparts on other worlds aside from the above-mentioned wild talents. They are highly versatile, having no class or level limitations. While they gain no racial ability bonuses, neither do they suffer any racial ability penalties. Humans make up the bulk of the Tablelands population and are in charge of all the known city-states. Humans have the greatest potential of all the races, being unlimited in their class advancement. They can climb to become the rulers of the world. As for their relations with other races, each individual human has their own views, but as a group they get along well with just about anyone who is not being hostile towards them. As far as physical appearance goes, Athasian humans are slightly shorter and a little more muscular than humans of other worlds. They can also have minor mutations, such as odd skin colors, one example being gray, spindly fingers, pointed ears, or one of many other purely cosmetic differences. Lastly, Athasian humans tend to have higher ability scores than humans from other worlds. On average, this is only a difference of about 10% though. Now let's delve into Athasian elves. The elves of Athos are markedly different from those of other worlds, both physically and culturally. They are tall, lean desert nomads who run, following their herds or the caravans they prey on, across the harsh wilderness of Athos. They are not the precocious woodland beings of Torel or Kryn. They are survivors both of an ancient genocidal war and the brutal wilderness of Athos. Because of this, they have no tolerance for anything that could slow them down. They see life as right now, because the past is gone and tomorrow is promised to no one. Elves care little for anyone outside their tribe, and see those beings as inferior, as well as untrustworthy. For the most part, elves with their live life in the now attitudes have reinforced this stereotype in the members of other races who have dealings with them. This is not to say that all elves, especially player characters, are racist thieves ready to stick a knife in your back, but that is their reputation. Individual elves have a tendency not to trust members of other races until they have proven themselves in a life or death situation. Physically, Athasian elves are quite different from standard elves as well. They are long-limbed, standing over 2 feet taller than a normal 2e elf. They put those long legs to good use in their nomadic lifestyle by running over 50 miles a day while the tribe is on the move. Athasian elves are stronger, lighter on their feet, hardier, smarter, but less endearing on average than their off-world cousins. Elves can be clerics, defilers, fighters, gladiators, specialist wizards, preservers, psionicists, rangers, traders, templars, and thieves. Next is a mix of the first 2 races, the half-elf. Being seldomly fully accepted in either of the societies of their parent races, half-elves tend to be self-reliant. Many are loners eking out an existence in the wilderness or in the slums of a city-state. This lone wolf attitude comes with a few hard-won advantages. At normal starting level, half-elf PCs gain a bonus survival proficiency in the terrain type they are most familiar with. As they advance, they can even befriend a pet who will travel with them on their adventures. The physical difference between standard half-elves and Athasian half-elves are much like those with elves. Athasian half-elves tower over their cousins from other worlds, and with that extra height comes more extra weight as well. Athasian half-elves tend to have higher ability scores across the board than their standard half-elf counterparts. Athasian half-elves have no class restrictions and are unlimited in their advancement as bards, defilers, fighters, gladiators, and psionicists. Moving on to dwarves. The dwarves of Athos take many dwarf traits and turn them up to 11. The one most notable physical difference is their lack of hair of any kind. No beard, no body hair, no hair on their heads. As you can see in this picture, they are built like boulders. Their heavy skeletons are covered with thick, bulging muscles. Athasian dwarves are not only heavier, but about a half-foot taller than most other types of dwarves. Athasian dwarves are stubborn in the extreme. They take on a major task called their focus that they must complete. If they die with their focus incomplete, they will rise up as a dwarven banshee and haunt their failure for all eternity until someone completes their focus. Like most other races from the Dark Sun setting, Athasian dwarves tend to have higher scores in all 6 abilities. Athasian dwarves can be clerics, fighters, gladiators, psionists, templars, and thieves. Halflings are what we will explore next. Like with the elves, Athasian halflings completely subvert expectations. Aside from the fact that they are short and have large appetites, more on that later, nothing of the traditional halfling has survived. Athasian halflings are often described as feral and cannibalistic. While not technically cannibals, halflings don't eat each other. They will eat other player character races, along with most anything else they can get their hands on. Physically, instead of being chubby and having hairy feet, all halflings of the Dark Sun setting are muscular and lean, and have wild, thick hair, and the faces of beautiful, savage children. Culturally, halflings find other races to be alien. They see themselves as the people, and have a strong affinity for their own kind. This is largely due to the fact that the halfling race hails almost entirely from isolated villages in the jungles beyond the Ringing Mountains. Athasian halflings' average ability scores vary wildly from the standard variety. Some are better, some are worse. Nothing averages out to be exactly the same. Halflings from Athas can be clerics, druids, fighters, gladiators, psionists, rangers, and thieves. That brings us to my favorite race to play, the Mull. The first thing that I should say about this is, I, like most of the rest of the Dark Sun community, mispronounce the name of this race. It is pronounced mule, like the crossbreed between a horse and a donkey. In both cases, the resulting creature is sterile and extremely endurant. Because the equine mule already exists and shares so many traits with the demi-human one, I have always felt it was way too on the nose to say it that way. I say it the way it's spelled, mull. Now that we have that out of the way, what is a mull? A mull is a tall, heavily muscled hybrid of human and dwarf. Like dwarves, mulls are sturdy and built for toil. Like humans, they are tall and versatile. They combine many of the best traits of their parents. Because of this, they are much sought after as gladiators and laborers. They can keep working for days without rest in conditions that would kill other races after only a handful of hours. Mulls have no standard AD&D 2nd edition counterpart to compare them to. Mulls can be clerics, druids, fighters, gladiators, psionists, and thieves. From here on out, we'll be getting into what could be called monster races. Let's start with half-giants. Half-giants, unlike mulls that can only come of the union of a dwarf and a human because they are sterile, are not the result of a human and giant coupling. Because of the size difference of those two races, successful breeding is impossible. Half-giants are actually the product of an ancient magical experiment, perhaps performed by one of the sorcerer monarchs. In the time since, they have become a stable race. Half-giants are between 10 and 12 feet tall and are powerfully built. They are the strongest and hardiest of all the PC races, but they are also known for their low wisdom and intelligence. Because of this, half-giants haven't really developed their own culture. Instead, they copy the ways of the races they frequently come into contact with. This holds true on an individual level too. Half-giants tend to find the most charismatic person around and befriend them. This usually results in that person having a half-giant following them around like a lost puppy. On a daily basis, half-giants can switch one half of their alignment to match their special friend. Being many times the size of a normal player character has advantages and disadvantages. The pros are that they are stronger than an ox and have twice the hit points of other races. On the con side, they need more food and water. Clothing, armor, even buildings aren't made for them. Because of this, equipping and housing a half-giant can be quite expensive. Half-giants can be clerics, fighters, gladiators, psionists, and rangers. This is where things get weird. The mantis warriors known as Thrycream look like enormous praying mantises, only they are bipedal and have 4 arms ending in a 4-fingered claw hand. They are around 7 feet tall and 11 feet long, and like halflings are known for their taste for the flesh of other player character races, particularly elves. Because of this, they are often seen as monsters, and elves have specially trained tribe members whose whole purpose in life is to hunt down and kill Thrycream. This is not to say that Thrycream should always expect hostility from other races, only that they shouldn't be surprised by it. Thrycream have some great advantages over other player character races. First, because of their exoskeleton, Thrycream players start out as hard to hit as a normal PC wearing chainmail. Thrycream can leap great heights and distances. Thrycream never sleep, so they don't have to worry about being attacked while they're catching 40 winks. When they are attacked, Thrycream can respond with 4 claw attacks and a bite every round. On top of that, their bite can paralyze victims. Thrycream also have a good chance of dodging arrows, bolts, and rocks loosed at them. After all that, you're probably wondering why anyone would play anything but a Thrycream. Well, there are several reasons. The big one is that they only live to be 36 years old. Any effect that ages a Thrycream rapidly is a very big deal. Other issues Thrycreams have are they don't speak common unless they've spent a non-weapon proficiency slot that allows them to. Also, they don't do well in moist environments. If they stay too long in the forest ridge or a cave, their shell will start to rot. Cold is extra hard on Thrycreams as well. High in the mountains, they could die from exposure long before the weather becomes a problem for other PCs. Thrycreams can be clerics, druids, fighters, gladiators, psionists, and rangers. Let's move on to Paterans. These reptilian humanoids are relative newcomers to the Tablelands, having only recently ventured out from their villages in the hinterlands. In some ways, they're like Thrycreams. They have natural armor, their scaly hide being equal to leather armor. Their claws also make effective natural weapons. The average Pateran's about the size of a human. They have heads resembling those of a pterodactyl, and at some point their ancestors had wings. All that remains of these now are vestigial nubs on their upper backs. Another way that Paterans are somewhat like Thrycream is they're short-lived. They only live about 50 years. Pateran culture is highly religious, venerating the Earth Mother. Several times throughout the day, Paterans will stop what they are doing and perform religious observances. These observances celebrate the Earth Mother and serve to remind the Pateran of the many blessings she has bestowed upon them. Like the halflings, Paterans are new to the cultures of the Tablelands. Because of this, they can be a little guarded around strangers until they get to know them better. Paterans can become druids, fighters, gladiators, psionists, rangers, thieves, and traders. Finally, we come to the last player character race I'm going to cover in this video. There are 2 more, but I'm not going to spoil those here. Aarakocra are vulture people who live mainly in the mountains of Athos. All PC Aarakocra come from a village in the White Mountains called Winternest. PC Aarakocra stand on average about 7.5 feet tall and have a wingspan of around 20 feet. This makes them the only Dark Sun PC race with the natural power of flight. Player character Aarakocra, unlike their monster brethren, have plumes that range from pale blue to silver to white. These give them an even better armor class than Paterans. On the mid-joint of their wings they have 4-fingered clawed hands. With these or their taloned feet, they can make attacks on enemies in melee. Aarakocra do not like enclosed spaces. They have trouble fighting in them. Because of their lightweight bones, Aarakocra take extra damage from bludgeoning weapons. Like Thrycream, Aarakocra are a short-lived race. Even the most venerable of their elders never live past their 42nd year. Aarakocra have a strong love of freedom and the open sky. They love nothing better than to soar through the olive air over Athos. Aarakocra can be clerics, druids, fighters, preservers, psionists, rangers, thieves, and traders. Hopefully you were taking notes and now have a few ideas of what you'd like to play. Remember, what I presented in this video was just a quick primer to help you get started. It was by no means comprehensive and will not include any house rules or homebrew that your DM may have in their Dark Sun game. If you have any Dark Sun or AD&D 2nd Edition questions, please leave them in the comments. I'll be happy to answer any of them. Also, if you could let us know what your first character ended up being, I'd love to know. Well, that's all for this one. I wish you good luck on your rolls and many happy hours under the Dark Sun. Have a great day.